Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the briefing room. Yes, indeed, my name is Eric Cavanaugh. I will be your host and analyst today, serving double duty for a webinar on a very, very hot topic, folks. The exact title is Line of Sight, How Catalogs Can Enable Digital Transformation. It's going to be just yours truly and Peter Prinsen, Senior Product Manager from Calibra, calling in all the way from Belgium, so we thank him for staying up late. It's 10 o'clock out there, so he's a dedicated employee. I'm going to say a few quick words at the top of the hour here, and I encourage all of you to send in your comments and questions as well, if there's anything in particular you'd like to learn today. But let me just give you some context from my perspective. So I came up with this idea last year to refer to the Great Migration. And what I'm talking about is movement to the cloud, frankly. I thought for sure that there would be a lot of movement from enterprise teams into cloud computing as far back as 2012, 2013, and so forth. But from my perspective, those topics were still snoozers. Now, granted, we're a media company. We're an analyst firm, the Bloor Group, but also a media company. And so we're always trying to focus on the cutting edge and really what's just about to happen, because that's what's interesting. That's what people will show up for a webinar to watch, is something that's cutting edge, that is really interesting, and is about to change the way business is done. If we only focused on everything that's happening right now, we wouldn't get too much attendance. So we're always a bit forward-looking. But nonetheless, the data set that I use to understand which topics are hot and which aren't so hot is the database that we use and the response we get in the marketing that we do. So in 2012, in 2014, in 2015, anything with cloud in the title was just a snoozer. You'd hear crickets. Nobody clicked, nobody registered, nobody cared. Nobody in large organizations seemed to pay much attention to the cloud. Well, all of that is changing now, and that's why I come up with this concept of the Great Migration. The cloud is now the new center of gravity. All organizations all over the world realize they must take a cloud-first approach. But what does that mean if you've got mountains of data on-prem? That's going to be a really serious challenge. We're going to talk about that today. So I credit Satya Nadella, a very, very smart guy, Microsoft CEO. Why is he smiling? I think he is the one who, by moving Microsoft's whole hog toward the cloud, really changed the dynamic in large organizations, because I think a lot of people, data professionals, other transformation professionals, for example, realize that if Microsoft is going all in, this thing is real and we need to start getting our act together. Of course, I think it's a bit ironic that we can thank Microsoft for saving us from the monopoly of Amazon Web Services, but that's exactly what happened. Amazon is still the force to be reckoned with. They are still the leader in that space. It's hard to say exactly what the data is in terms of who's out there and who's really hosting the most applications. But way back in 2011, I think it was, I took a briefing from Amazon Web Services, and I was stunned at how robust their portfolio was of web services way back 8 years ago. Well, they're obviously rocking and rolling to this day, but now we see a lot more activity in the enterprise. And really around 2016 and into 2017, the cloud has taken off. People realize it's real. They have to move towards the cloud, and that's happening. But how are you going to do that? So here's one of my favorite pictures you may remember. The Borg, resistance is futile. You too will be assimilated. I'm pretty sure data centers everywhere are going to be assimilated. Companies now realize it's mandatory to seriously examine the cloud. Now, there are going to be some use cases where the cloud is simply not going to take off. I was at an event last year, a very, very interesting event about the new in-memory ERP that SAP is rolling out. And one of the smart consultants there told me, frankly, he said CFOs, chief financial officers, are not going to want to move to the cloud. They're going to want to have their data on-prem. They're going to want to have it protected. There's almost no chance of that happening. So there are certainly some use cases where it's not going to be a cloud-first kind of environment. But nonetheless, I think the cloud is the Borg of the future. Resistance is futile. We must move to the cloud. So how on earth is that going to happen? Well, data catalogs, speaking of a hot topic, when the term was first floated somewhat extensively back in, I want to say, 2015 timeframe, 2016 timeframe, I didn't think it was going to take off, and I was proven about just how wrong I can be, because the numbers were just through the roof. Everyone seemed to understand intrinsically what this stuff was, what it did, and why we needed it. Now, the concepts are not new. We've had data dictionaries for decades. We've had business glossaries for decades, ontologies. All these things have been around for a while, but they never really took complete hold of the enterprise information management environment in large organizations. And I think that's largely because the functionality just wasn't there yet. It was too hard to do. It was too painstaking. The software really wasn't good enough to get that job done. And so most of those projects were kind of on the side somewhere. Semantic technologies, for example, using semantics to try to organize data sets. In certain industries, ontologies were very, very powerful 20 years ago even. In pharmaceutical industries, for example, there are certain places where it made a lot of sense. But by and large, business glossaries and data dictionaries of the past just did not take off. Data catalogs are different, and I think it's because of the functionality, but it's also because of the driving forces behind what's happening in the world of information management today. So let's think about how stuff gets funded, how projects get funded. We've been hearing about this CapEx to OpEx movement for quite some time now. Big ticket budgeting processes are kind of a way of the past, and this is all over the place in society. You can see it in terms of marketing budgets. Instead of planning out a whole year, assiduously executing that plan, these days you see more what's called iterative marketing, where companies are allocating pockets of money as time goes by and then allocating more pockets of money. And that's partly because of the dynamics in the market today. It's partly because of how things are shifting in terms of how you get things done, in terms of the technologies you can use, the platforms, the cloud. I talk a lot about the MarTech 7000 on these shows. That's 7,000 software applications for automating sales and marketing. 12 years ago, it was like 100. Now it's 7,000. That gives you an idea of how powerful the cloud is. And, of course, look at Salesforce. Look at the force that it is. But the bottom line here is that the old days of a capital expenditure for a data warehouse of $2 million that takes 2 years to build, that's over. That simply is not going to survive in the modern world. So everyone is moving to shorter cycle times, smaller amounts of budget. Well, what does that mean? I would submit to you folks out there that movement from on-prem to cloud may be one of the last chances for a major initiative to get a lot of budget to accomplish a very, very significant task, which is migrating to the cloud. So to me, in my opinion, without a data catalog, that's going to be a very painful and messy operation. It's going to be very ineffective, and I would suggest to use this opportunity to take a hard look at your data. Use this opportunity of migrating from on-prem into cloud environments, whichever cloud environment you choose. Use this opportunity to re-examine what data you have, what business processes you have, and how you can collapse those. And guess what that's called? That's called digital transformation. So digital transformation is happening right now. It's happening everywhere. Data is the fuel of digital transformation. So if you don't understand your data and you're trying to move to the cloud, you may have a transformation, but it's not going to be a very effective one. By the way, I found this image just today from the Song Dynasty, the world's earliest paper money. Yes, paper money still does exist, and hopefully it will continue to exist. So let's just think about who's out there. Salesforce, let's give them credit for really throwing down the gauntlet 20-some years ago. It's now the tallest building in San Francisco is the Salesforce building. Of course, Mark Benioff came out of Oracle, so he learned how to do his job back then. Amazon, Oracle, Azure, SAP, IBM, Google is getting very serious with their cloud platform. You can see it by who's moving over there. I've seen a lot of top talent from major enterprise software vendors moving over to Google and moving over to Amazon Web Services because those guys are finally taking this stuff seriously. And for those who really understand the enterprise software industry, there is a bit of a disconnect in these large vendors, the sort of super vendors, and it's because they historically have not provided that kind of service. It's more of a one-size-fits-all for the really, really big guys. But that's changing, and they're getting very serious about moving into the field of enterprise computing. Heroku, Rackspace, etc. The cloud is real. It's a force to be reckoned with. You must go in that direction if you're going to survive, it seems to me. And with that, I'm going to hand the keys over to Peter Prinsen in Belgium. Peter, take it away. Show us what you got. Tell us about Calibra, how extracting more value from your data.
Yes, thanks, Eric. Can you see my screen?
I can indeed.
Okay, perfect. Good. So thanks for the introduction, indeed. So yeah, I agree. The catalogs, the data catalogs, they're appearing everywhere, and also at Calibra, obviously. And what I want to speak about today is how to extract more value from the data, because that's basically what you want. And I want to focus on two topics. One, as you mentioned, the move to the cloud. So why would you move to the cloud, and that trend, why is that happening? And then also, what's the role of a catalog in that movement, and why do you need it? And then to explain it, I want to do a bit of history, see a bit why people need to get more value from data, why that is, and also see why that wasn't possible with how companies were organized before, and how that transformation to that new organization needs that movement to the cloud and that data catalog, right? Okay, so let's maybe start with some numbers. So first, numbers from sources here, McKinsey. Digital disruption are happening faster than ever. So the source says like 8%, only 8% of companies believe that their business model that they have today will remain economically viable in the coming years. So this means that 92% actually thinks they need to change their business model in order to survive. And a good example of that, what we see is it's also a Colibra customers there that we have. For example, John Deere, a very traditional industry, very traditional farming equipment industry has been there for years. So they realize that if we want to be able to survive, we need to maybe focus on different areas. And instead of just selling this farming equipment as they used to do for years, they're now selling it with sensors, because their machines are used all over the world. And this means that wherever they are used, they collect data around humidity of the crops, around soil, around weather. So they upload this to their data center in the cloud, and they actually offer a data service to their customers, right? So you actually have there a very traditional industry moving towards a more data-focused industry where they actually offer data service to their customers, that they can access, their farmers can access the data to see, well, is this the right moment for me to harvest my crops? Is it the right moment to act, right? So that's a typical example of how business model can change. And as the example already illustrates, well, data is really at the core of that digital transformation that needs to happen. So data and the analytics run on the data. This is from the Hackett Group, these numbers. You see that overall here, there's approximately 40% increase expected in the use of advanced analytics in decision-making in a company, right? So 40% increase over 2 to 3 years. Now, more advanced analytics means more data will be used, right? More data to be used means you will have to make more data available to more people in order to be able to scale your analytics. So just give more people access to data. That should solve it. If it only were that simple, of course, right? It is not that simple, and you can see that because there's if you look at numbers from this MIT survey, so that okay, over the past year, 77% of the respondents reports that they saw an increase in access to useful data. So that's good. But then only 49% were successful in actually generating useful insights from that data, right? So there is a clear disparity between people who get access to data and people who actually can use it to generate insights. And basically that's the thing that you want to achieve. So it's clear that just giving more people access to more data is not enough. Now, this discrepancy between the predicted increase in the use of analytics to transform business, and then the fact that people don't seem to succeed in generating insights from this data, well, where does it come from? And to explain this, I already told you, like, I want to look a bit back in time, like let's say 10 years back in time, and I want to explain to you the rise of the data citizen, right? And that's basically what this whole change will be based on. So let's go back, for example, let's say 10 years or so. Eric already mentioned it. Expensive data warehouses were built in those days, right? There was a data warehouse, centrally located data warehouse, and that was the place for all data to generate insights. Right? But yeah, what happened? Some of you were around definitely. What happened when you asked a non-technical user, well, sure, you need data to the data warehouse. Well, they would glaze over, right? People didn't like the data warehouse is technical. It's very static. Data warehouse just lacks usability, consumability, and diversity of content. There was only data. You couldn't see what this data was used for. No clue, no notion of the meaning of the data, no dashboards that were created with the data. So really, if you were non-technical, if you were not a data professional, that was a no-go for you. So I call this period the era of the data professionals. So only people that were actually whose job was to work with data could actually use it to a good purpose. Now, these data warehouses, as I said, everything was very technical there. Access was strictly managed. Let's make sure that, let's say, the plats cannot access the data, so it's only for the professionals. So it's very difficult to get access to the data warehouse. Even if you would get access, well, there was no analytics services available. Right? You would need to get the data out and then take it to some analytics tools that you could leverage. So what was the result? Most people were just using pre-built reports, pre-built insights by happy few, by the data professionals. Right? That was how it was. That was the era of the data professional. Now, coming back to this slide, if we expect or we say that we need in the coming 2 to 3 years a 40% increase in advanced analytics, well, the old model of this data professional that just doesn't scale, right? Means that enabling the power of analytics only for these data professionals, that would never work. What you really want is to enable more people. You want to enable the data citizen. Now, this is the second time I use that word, data citizen, so maybe about time that I explain what I mean by data citizen. Well, at Colibra, we defined a few years ago a data citizen as someone that uses data to do their job. Not someone whose job is to use data. This is not a BI professional, BI analyst. No, it's someone that uses data to do their job. For example, I'm a product manager. My job is to build products. But obviously, I am very interested to know when I release a new feature to the market, how many people actually use it. When I release a new version to the market, well, how many people actually upgrade. It's not my job to create this kind of insights, but I want to do that. I want to be data-driven in the decisions that I make. Right? So I'm a data citizen. I'm not a data professional. Right? And for us, Colibra identified the data citizen as being so crucial in this process that we even issued a real-life Bill of Rights for the data citizen. And you can download it from our website. A few things is you have the right to access data, you have the right to trust data, you have the right to data transparency, and so on and so on. So there is a very important role for these contrast with the data professional. I think it's very clear. It's a play of numbers. Now, if you want to serve the data citizen, such as myself, well, there were several initiatives that were started, and many of you will have started these initiatives too in your companies. I think most commonly known as self-service BI and data lakes, right? These were created like to allow more people to access data, to increase the speed and volume of analytics, right? Just make it self-service and make sure it's in a data lake so everyone can access it. That was the whole idea behind it. But then the data citizen, who's not necessarily a data professional, as I said, well, if you want to make use of the numbers of the data citizen, well, you need to make sure that they can act independently. And this raises completely new requirements to your data landscape, because you cannot expect everyone to be knowledgeable about all data they will want to use. And if every person, every citizen would have to count on a professional to guide them, well, that kind of defeats the purpose, right? So it's safe to say that to enable this data citizen, you need two things. First, you need something that helps them find data, understand it, and trust and access it in large numbers. And second of all, you need to give them the tools, you need to give them services to be able to run analytics, to analyze data fast. these two things. So something to help them find, understand, and access data, and something that gives them the tools and the service to analyze data. Only if you have those two in place, your data system can be effective. And we see that it's still a problem often today. There are some numbers here, I highlighted a few. You see that the two key things here are data is not easy to find. See, 80% of the analyst's time is still spent on discovering, preparing data, only 20% in really using it. And large amount of data are still left unused when it comes to analytics. Only 50% of organizations' structured data is used, less than 1% of unstructured data. So these numbers are quite strong, right? So this means that you need a framework that gives you as a data citizen, as a data consumer, a clear view on the data you have out there in your company, what it means and how well you can trust it. I mean, you want to use the data and make sure that the numbers that you will present in your next speaking don't make you look like a fool, right? You need to be able to trust them. And also you need to have the data in an environment that offers a range of analytic services that you need to be able to extract the insights from the data. And actually, the answers to those two things, well, you have the cloud and you have a catalog such as Colibra offers. So those two things will help you do that. I will explain you how that actually works then. Okay. So these two challenges, let's say we accept them. Well, the easiest, the cheapest way to get someone started in analyzing and using data, well, that's to move it to the cloud, right? Because in the cloud, it's Amazon, Google, Microsoft, or whatever other cloud platform, you have a plethora of analytic services, AI and ML services. It's very easy to access data in the cloud. And it's something that will be very hard to do for on-premises data. And if you can, well, it's very costly, right? Imagine you want to do some serious crunching on a big data set. Well, you may need, an example, a 20-node Spark cluster to do that in a reasonable time. Well, in the cloud, you can spin it up for a day and spin it down afterwards, and that's your only cost. Well, if you would have to do it on premises, you would have to buy the hardware and deploy all that. So that's simply referring to that CAPEX, OPEX story. That's not going to happen anymore. People don't want that anymore. Right? Now, that act of moving data there, that's relatively simple, right? Putting the data in the cloud. The difficulty comes when you talk about, well, I have a lot of data on premises. Which data should I move first? Because moving the data is done by technical people, by IT, but the data that's needed, well, that request will come from the business, right, depending on which analytics they want to run. So that's the first thing, which data to move. And the second thing is, well, once data is in the cloud, how do you give people then a way to find that data? Because a lot of data will end up there in the end. And to understand it, and even if you find a lot of data there that seems reasonably what you need, well, how can you make sure that you understand it correctly and that you can actually trust it, right? That you don't make a fool of yourself, as I said, when you go do all your analysis using that data. Well, to solve those two issues, you need a data catalog, or you need a catalog that's all encompassing, right? It's a data catalog that gives you a unified view on that distributed situation that you have created by moving data from on-premises to the cloud. And as I've shown it here, well, that's actually real life, right? You don't have just one cloud. Probably you have a multi-cloud, and you have on-premises data too. So it's a hybrid multi-cloud environment, and you actually want a catalog that gives you a unified view on this data landscape. Right? And this view, this catalog, well, it should offer you a few things. First thing, and I've put the 4 key items that you need for your catalog here. Well, I already mentioned it. A catalog should offer you a prioritization mechanism, right, to move your data to the cloud. Because as I said, IT or technical people will move the data there, but it's the business that knows which data, which kind of data they want. So you need some mechanism to decide which data to move first. And that's the role of the catalog too, right? Putting that priority in place. Catalog is the interface of the business person or data citizen, the non-technical person to your data landscape. prioritization is one thing. Then once the data is in your world, you need a way to measure the trustworthiness of your data. I find a data set in my data lake, it looks perfect to me. Can I trust it? You want to know that, right? Otherwise you won't start your work even. Then the third thing is, well, you want to see a data preview. You don't want a catalog to just be a metadata repository. That's of no use. So that exists for years, like basic data dictionary, but you want to know more. You want some business context. You want to get some peek preview of the data already before you start building your models or building your analytics on top of that. And last but not least, you will need a very, very powerful search engine, because you don't want your search engine to distinguish between data in one of the cloud providers or on-premises and cloud. You want your search engine to go across physical boundaries, right? So that you as a data citizen can just look at your catalog and see the data no matter where it is. So I'll go a bit deeper into each of these 4 points to make clear how a catalog actually helps there, and that you can see that this actually will make sure that your movement to the cloud is successful using a catalog. So the first thing, prioritization. Eric already mentioned business glossaries has been out there for years. Data dictionary has been out there for years. They've never been so successful or terribly successful. Why? Well, makes sense, because indeed they were completely, let's say, decoupled from your data landscape. Now, in our view, catalog needs to have an integrated data business glossary, and an integrated stewardship module. Why? Because if I'm a data citizen and I cannot find data yet in the data lake, the data is not there yet. As I said, you cannot move everything at once to the cloud. I can just refer to my business glossary and say, okay, I want data. I want data about prices, product, about orders. These are business terms. And the stewardship module makes sure that all these business terms have ownerships assigned, experts assigned. So without having to know who's responsible for this kind of data, I can just click in catalog and say, okay, I need orders, price, and forecast data. And the catalog will fire off the request to the necessary business people, system owners, but also technical people to make sure they move that data to the cloud. And in this way, a catalog helps you to make sure that your data lake, your cloud lake, doesn't become just a data swamp, right? That it's really full of content that's useful for people, right? And it's then the business people that can drive what is going to the analytics environment in the cloud. So that's the first thing, prioritization, the catalog. Second thing is, well, the catalog needs to give you trust in data. And you can generate trust in multiple ways. First thing, I would here, rating. It's one of the examples of the collaborative trust. Right? See that if a lot of my peers use this data, they used it very recently, they gave it a good rating, that must mean that this data is good, right? It gives me some confidence that I can also use this data and not the only one that will use the wrong data. If it would be wrong, it's probably not wrong, otherwise people wouldn't keep using it. That's the crowdsourced trust that you get. Now, another thing is a certification. So besides that crowdsourcing part, there is also an official certification that you can put in place by your company. You can say for certain purposes, only officially certified data sets can be used. Now, both trust measures are equally valid, right? The cloud crowdsourced way will be probably a bit faster to get some insights in the trust. But the certification, once it's done, it's lasting. It's using the company standards. Right? So rating, certification, those are two things that can give you trust in data. But also, and I've taken an extract, and I do realize it's quite small on the screen now. Traceability, right? This diagram actually shows you that, and I'll tell you what you see here. You see a BI report that you see here. And you see not only that, but you see the data that was used to create this report, this insight. And you see more than that. You see the original source of that data and the ETL from the raw zone of the lake to the refined zone of the lake. So you actually can generate trust for people to see, okay, where did this come from? So where does this data come from? And then the other direction, okay, what has this data already been used for in the past? So both directions are valid to see whether this data can be trusted. And of course, the stewardship comes back, like you see that I have this little avatar here. So for each step, there will be a person that you can contact. Okay, this person has already used the data, or this person is responsible for it, and whatever, however he is there, this role, you can contact this person to get more information. So the traceability is the third factor to generate trust there. Okay, then my third item was that I want to get some unified visibility and I want to get some preview of the data. I said I don't only want a metadata repository, I do not only want a data dictionary. Because let me take a concrete example here. Let's say I want to run a marketing campaign and I'm specifically targeting people of the age between 30 and 40 years old. Well, data dictionary would tell me, well, here in this data set you have a column first name, you have a column last name, you have an email address column, and you have an age column. Right? So that seems okay, and it comes from our marketing pipeline, so it seems okay because like there's an age column, I can filter on the age, and I have an email address, so I can really contact these people. Okay? So you request access to the data set, you get it back, and what seems to happen? There is not a single person between age 30 and 40 in that data set. You have to avoid it. This will slow down your analytics. So you want your catalog to already give you a peek preview of the data. This can be completely anonymized. There's no problem there. But at least you can see that the data in that data set doesn't only sound good, it will actually also looks good. Right? So giving some preview into the data is the third thing that you want. And then the last thing, search. Right? We see it as the Amazon or the Google for your data landscape. That's what your catalog is. Right? And if I search on Google, I'm not thinking in technical terms. I'm not thinking, if I search on Amazon, I'm not thinking in how would this product be stored in the Amazon Web Store data lake. I'm not thinking in that way. I'm thinking like I need a vacuum cleaner or I need whatever I need. Right? I think in business terms. That's how I want my catalog to operate for my data landscape. I want to be able to think in business terms, search in business terms, for example, orders or for sales forecast or price. And then I want to be able to drill down on the multiple options I get or the multiple search results I get. I want to be able to drill down by star rating. I want to be able to drill down by date type, for example. I don't want a BI report, I want a data set, for example. I want to be able to drill down by department that's owning the data. Right? What I care less about is where is this data stored. I don't want my search to be specific for my data source. No, as I said, I wanted to grow across physical boundaries. I wanted to give me a unified view on that distributed landscape. I don't even want to know about that distribution. Right? So thinking in business terms, searching in business terms. That's the fourth very important thing. Right? So these are the four things that a catalog needs. So prioritizing data to move to the cloud, then some mechanism to generate that trust in that data, then a powerful search, and a preview on the data so that you can see which data you're actually dealing with. Okay. So this was what I wanted to mention. I would like to summarize it in one slide, my whole story, to make sure it didn't make you lose a thread of my story. So as I said, in order to survive, digital disruption is key. Companies are transforming, changing their business model in order to survive. Well, as statistics show, predictions show, you will need more day-to-day analytics, more day-to-day decisions based on advanced analytics. Well, if you want to make that scale, well, that single data profession, that will not be enough. You will need more people to do that.
Did I lose you? Are you still there, Peter? Okay, folks, he may be having some trouble. So we've got a bunch of good questions coming in. And let me take a look at some of those. Lineage is one of the questions folks are asking, and how do you deal with issues like data lineage? And that's one of the benefits is when you pull in, when you use a data catalog to manage the movement of this data, you get that provenance, you get that lineage baked into the system, and then you can understand where it comes from. This obviously is going to become very important with issues like GDPR, right, with the General Data Protection Regulation that's coming out of the EU. We're going to need to be able to show regulators, business partners, et cetera, that we know where this information has come from and that we're dealing with it appropriately. So this is something to definitely keep in mind as we move forward. I'm going to try to call out once again to our friend here. Just give me a minute. So that's one of the big issues. I'm seeing some other issues too, or some questions around kind of how to get started with all this. I thought that was a really interesting point that Peter had made, that basically you use the data catalog to help you in that process of figuring out which data you should send first. So this is going to be a long process. And actually one of the points I wanted to make in my presentation earlier was that figuring out how to prioritize, well, that's a really big issue because it's going to take a lot of time to work through these different domains of information. So how do you do that? Well, what Peter was saying is that you can actually use the data catalog for that process. I'm going to call out to Peter right now. Let's see, hold on. Let's see if we can get him back on the line. Oh, no, I did the wrong thing here. Okay, folks, feel free to send your questions in during the broadcast here. We'll try to get to them as time goes by. Let me look at some of the other questions here. Okay, so one attendee is asking, interesting concept, curious how this solution is hosted, cloud versus internally hosted. Are there significant charges of extracting data from the cloud to a data citizen's laptop? I'm going to have to leave that one for our speaker to figure out, frankly. Looks like we're not having trouble with that. Hold on one second. Give me one more second here, folks. So let's see, what else do we have? So one of our attendees writes, MIT just published a document that said 90% of AI, and by extension BI, is spent wrangling the data. Should that time be spent on-prem or in the cloud? In my opinion, we need to use a data catalog as the marshaling area. It really needs to be in between the cloud and your on-prem environment, and it needs to be the focal point. So if it isn't, well, what's going to happen here? You're going to have piecemeal approaches of trying to stitch together data that's in the cloud and data that's on-prem, and that's obviously not where we need to go. So in my opinion, we really need to go whole hog into the data catalog as the marshaling area that you use. And it's the marshaling area that you use to connect on-prem to your cloud environment, and it stays there. So what's the other key factor here? Let's think about what's going to happen. Multi-cloud is the reality. This is something I was trying to point out at the top of the hour. Multi-cloud is the new normal, and it's going to be the new normal. There's really no way that we're going to be able to get around that. So what do you do? How do you handle that? I think the key, once again, is that you handle that. Oh, it looks like Peter has dialed in. Yes, there he is. Hold on. So, folks, I'm going to unmute your line just so we can hear Peter, so please mute your own line.
Participant lines unmuted.
Hey, Peter, I think you're out there now, right?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me again?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you. So I was just talking to the audience here about a couple of the questions that had come in regarding how you actually manage this whole process. So one of the attendees was asking, MIT just published a document that says 90% of AI, and by extension BI, is spent wrangling the data. Should that time be spent on-prem or in the cloud? And my suggestion is that time should be spent in your data catalog connecting the on-prem environment to the cloud environment. Can you talk about that for a second? Peter, can you hear me? Well, it looks like we lost him again. I'll dial out to him one more time. Let me see what other questions we have here from the audience. So should the right to data privacy be considered a part of the Bill of Data Citizens? I mean, I think the answer is absolutely yes there. we're starting to see, even here in the U.S., GDPR-like regulations are taking place, are taking hold. We saw that in California. I think we're going to see that in many other states around the union. Whether or not Congress gets that done is another matter entirely. But I have to say that the straw in the wind here is pretty clear that we need to be more careful with our data. And I think the data catalog is going to help solve some of those problems too. So I'm calling back out to Peter once again. Let's see if we can pull him on the horn here as I check through some of your other. Peter, are you there? There you go.
Yes, this is better. I hear you.
Okay, there you go. So tell us a bit about, I say that you really should use the data catalog as your marshaling area. So as opposed to working in the cloud or on-prem, and that's another question, is where do you host this? So is Collibra typically hosted on-premise? Is it hosted in the cloud? How does that work?
Well, we offer both options, hosting on-prem and hosting on the cloud, but we see a tendency to go to the cloud, to be honest. Obviously, that's also something that you want. Now, what we do is that for on-prem data, we typically deploy some on-premises agents to access the data there, because you don't want to send your data to the cloud for some first analysis, right? So we do that on-premises if you have on-premises data. And we only host the metadata and the data preview in the cloud.
Okay. So ideally, where you're working on managing your data assets, let's talk about prioritization. You mentioned that as one of the key benefits of a data catalog.
Yes.
It helps you prioritize which data center. How does it do that?
Yeah. So that's indeed what I wanted to say. Like, if you let's say you're looking for data from let's say for doing today's sales forecasting, right? You go into your catalog, you see sales forecasts, and you do find some old report there, and you do see there see a data set that says, okay, this data is deprecated because we've moved to a new ERP system. Right? Now, the data from that ERP system, nobody has put that in the data lake yet in the analytics environment. It's still in that ERP system. So if you want that data to be available for analytics, it has to be in the cloud, it has to be in your lake. So in a catalog, like in a Collibra catalog, you can just click on business terms like product, price, and forecast, and say, okay, I need this kind of data from that system. And because Collibra knows who's owning that system, who is responsible for that kind of data, they will receive a request. And also the technical people, so the IT people that have to do that ETL, that have to do that move, they will receive a request. So you have to see Collibra there as the means to bring the business user that just wants that data to create these insights in contact with the people that actually have to make that happen, who may be on the other side of the world, who may be in other departments.
Yep, it seems to me cloud really should be the primary source for data going forward, right? And we're going to incrementally pull data from on-prem environments into the cloud, but that marshaling area should be the catalog, to your point, because you're going to have the most up-to-date version, right? Especially if you have a far-flung organization where you've got multiple different departments around the world. If cloud isn't the de facto center of gravity, you're simply not going to be able to keep tabs on what the latest data set is, right?
Exactly, 100% correct.
Let me throw this other question over to you. It's a pretty pointed question. It's, again, about cloud versus on-prem. How do you actually, are there charges in terms of movement of data? Is that something you can talk to? In other words, the charge for purchasing and using Collibra, is there an additional charge for moving data around, or it's just a flat fee?
So Collibra is the orchestrator, right? So we will not move your data to the cloud. We will orchestrate that whole movement of moving that whole happening of moving data to the cloud. Now, obviously, Collibra comes with a charge. You buy the product, but there's no additional charge whether you host our product in the cloud or on premises. That doesn't make a difference in price. So for us, it's the same price.
Okay, so here's a pointed question as well. One of our attendees wants to know, in a hybrid multi-cloud architecture, shouldn't my data catalog be hosted primarily in my data center and then, of course, have access to all those cloud environments? What do you think about that?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a very good question. This was the initial idea that people always had, right? Now, people also see the advantage of having our catalog in the cloud. So actually, we now ship a catalog. We can give a catalog in the cloud, but we have on-premises agents, crawlers that are close to the data, so that all the data analysis and all the data reading is done on-premises, and then only the metadata, let's say, or the created insights are sent to the cloud catalog. Because it has also a lot of advantages to having the catalog in the cloud, right? If you have a distributed company where you're not all inside one firewall, well, then it's an advantage that you can go to a cloud catalog, right?
Okay, good. And let's kind of talk about the process and how long it takes. I mean, obviously that depends heavily upon how much information you're trying to work with, how much information you're trying to move into the cloud. One of the attendees is asking, let's say you've got a very IT metadata-based system and you really want to move towards a more meaningful business information system. I mean, that's what a data catalog is doing technically, is it's kind of taking away some of the technical jargon and giving us a much more clear picture of the business meaning. What does that process look like? Is it weeks? Is it months? Is it a year? How long before, let's say, a mid-sized insurance company could really start getting significant value from a data catalog?
Yeah. So I think that can be quite rapidly. So what we advise our customers, of course, don't do all data at once, but what a catalog offers, like, first of all, you have your technical metadata. Of course, we want it. We take it in. We still want to know the technical metadata. But we have a business glossary, and that's the thing. If you don't have a business glossary yet in place, you can start defining it. But that doesn't take that long, right? But even if you don't have a business glossary, we have a concept of data classification, right? So we read your data and we recognize the main types like email addresses. So these are the things that we're gonna recognize. And what we do typically then is link these detected data classes to your business glossary. But even if you don't have that glossary in place yet, there is still value in that. So you can get started quite rapidly. To be honest. And that's,
okay, and
that's problem, but as I said, prioritize.
Sure. And is Calibra able to use existing repositories of metadata from existing tools? In other words, can you import like a business glossary very quickly? Can you talk about that process?
Yeah, indeed. So what we do, so we have, of course, our own ingestion engines to connect to all these data sources, but we also have a Calibra connector, which allows us to connect to any tool that has an API. So if you have an existing metadata repository, you can connect to it. And even the most basic importing is like, let's say you have an old mainframe that contains information. You have people that say, okay, I want to recuperate or I want to reuse that information. Then we can just do an Excel import. You use Excel or CSV as a middle exchange file format, and then you use that to import the data. So multiple options there. Either you use our Calibra Connect to connect to these different metadata repositories, or you use like a file-based exchange. And the nice thing is that we are not making separate entries, right? We combine everything. So if we access a table ourselves, right? For example, let's say we access an Oracle database, we get some information from it, but there is also a data quality tool that has extra information of that Oracle database. Well, we also connect to the data quality tool and get that information too. So it's again that unified view on your data landscape. It's really the go-to place for the user to know everything about that data.
Okay, good. And here's another very specific question. An attendee is asking, how do you assign technical metadata to business metadata in the catalog? Is that a manual process, or how dynamic can that be?
Yeah, so there is a few mechanisms. So manual is obviously an option, that's traditional, but that doesn't really scale that well. So our vision on that is, well, you need some AI and ML in there, but it's always good to have a human validation afterwards. So what we do is like, we have a few mechanisms. We do natural language, which means that we look at the field name of the physical data that comes in, and we look at your business glossary and see, we do a fuzzy matching of what it could be. Next thing that we are working hard on is to do that automatic data classification, looking at the data, right? We recognize patterns in the data, we have a large set of basic dictionaries to recognize, for example, personal data like religion, politics, things like that, to be able to recognize that. So that's another thing, and we can then label it with a certain, let's say, how certain we are of it, and you can then choose like, okay, we're going to accept it, or we're going to have below a certain percentage have the user validate, right? So it's a combination of manual validation, but large part of it for the catalog should offer is that you automate these things.
Okay, and here's another good, very specific question. Would you say that Collibra offers, this is an attendee question, complete end-to-end governance, or do we have to integrate with some other product or develop our own governance programs through your APIs? Can you talk about governance per se?
Yes, absolutely. So I think if there's one thing that Collibra has always been known for, even before the catalog period, is governance, right? So it's we do the end-to-end governance, that's for sure, and we even develop, because actually Collibra delivers a platform and a catalog is built on that platform. We have built that, but we have built other things. We have built a GDPR solution. We have built we're building the California Act on top of that platform, because, well, this is pure governance, right? So it means that if you are looking at data in Collibra and you request access to Collibra catalog using our shopping basket, we have that shopping basket, that means that if you get access to Collibra, you can be sure that you are actually allowed to use data, right? Let's make the analogy that you shop for data in Collibra like you shop on Amazon. If you shop on Amazon and you get it delivered at your home, you don't want the police to be at your door the day after, so you couldn't have received that package, right? It's the same for Collibra. We govern everything to make sure that the data you get access to, you're actually allowed to use.
Okay, here's another very specific and excellent question. This is actually a question I have as well. We've got about a couple minutes left here, folks, so send them in if you got them. So one of the attendees asks, can crawlers be automated to run on-prem behind a corporate firewall against, for example, a Tableau server or an Oracle database to develop a technical metadata extract to update a cloud-based Collibra catalog? And what kind of security can be established? Talk about that.
Yeah. So that's exactly what I meant with this on-premises agent, right? So we have an on-premises agent that you can install close to your data, let's say to your Oracle database or to your Tableau server, and then we have a connection to our cloud catalog that you can configure. You can add the necessary certificates to have a secure connection, and in this way you can make sure that, well, from that on-premises data that has been analyzed, the data never left the premises, but the metadata that we harvest then goes in a secure way to our catalog in the cloud. And we see that's the option that most people actually go for nowadays.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And here's a general question, too, and it brings up a question I have in my mind as well. There are top-down approaches and bottom-up approaches. It seems to me with Collibra you can do both, right? Is there a preference? Do you find that top-down is more effective? Is bottom-up more effective? Can you talk about how you actually get the job done? And it reminds me of this whole movement of data prep, right, where you have people, end users out there managing the data, trying to make changes upstream to get a clearer view of particular data sets. Can you talk about top-down versus bottom-up implementation?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So indeed, both are possible, right? What we see that is if people start using the catalog and say like, okay, we're first going to define everything and how it should be and create our data model, and only then we're gonna register data in that catalog, physical data. Then we can, because Collibra catalog matches automatically to this model, and that works perfectly fine. But I mean, you can go the other way too, right? You just start registering data, but the prioritization coming from that business user, that's actually what makes sure that all the data you register, it's very streamlined what goes in and what doesn't go in.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And here's maybe one last question I'll throw over to you. In terms of data types, do you cover unstructured data in your catalog? And if so, what should one know in terms of the difference between structured versus unstructured cataloging?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what we do is we can register unstructured data, but we do not analyze it today. So you will first see that you have your an unstructured file, for example, that's possible, but we don't have the data preview and so on that we would offer for structured data today. So we are still focusing a lot on the structured data. But we are looking towards a future where, of course, unstructured data will come in that picture through the same mechanism. We see also that the demand is still more on the structured part.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so in terms of business drivers, we talked about cloud migration being a really important one, obviously. Digital transformation, to me, these kind of go hand in glove, right? A lot of times if you are achieving digital transformation, in some way, shape, or form, you're porting functionality to the cloud. What do you see as the main drivers for organizations to embrace data catalogs? Is it that migration to the cloud? Is it pure digital transformation? Is it GDPR? Some combination of those? Can you talk about that?
Well, it's a combination of those, definitely, but it's also about people that are building a data lake and already realize that, well, we need a gatekeeper and we need to have this catalog before it goes in, or even people that have built a data lake and failed and say, okay, we need to clean up exercise now. And they realize that making sure that, well, if you provide a data lake to your people and it's a mess, well, then it's not efficient, it will not work. So it's really making sure that the content of that data lake is clear, whether you make sure it gets in a clean way or it's visualized in a clean way. That's the key driver, and that's what we see most in our customer base.
Okay, good. Well, folks, we burned through an hour here. A big thanks to our friends at Collibra for today's briefing room. We are celebrating 10 years of the briefing room. We started way back in 2010. It's now 2019, so all year long we'll be celebrating 10 years of the briefing room. You folks play a significant role in that whole process. Wonderful, excellent questions today. Thanks for keeping me on my toes, folks. I do appreciate your input and your hard-hitting questions here. As I've said, to me, a data catalog really is becoming a must-have, certainly if you're going to be engaged in these kind of multi-cloud environments. There's just no other way you're going to be able to keep track of what's going on. And to one of our attendees' points, I think some of that management should be kept on-prem, and then you manage your cloud environment through that on-premise data catalog. But there are lots of ways to get it done. So this does conclude our broadcast. Big thanks once again to Peter, dialing in all the way from Belgium. We had a little phone trouble there for a while, but we managed to muddle through. Big thanks to all of you out there, folks. Exactly. Excellent questions today. Send me an email if you want to learn about a particular aspect of data catalogs. We have our whole AI promotion going all year long. We're going to be doing webinars and radio shows and writing articles about artificial intelligence. It's our IA on AI series. We'll be writing a book with Dr. Robin Bloor over the course of this year, and we look forward to learning more from you folks. So don't be shy. Send me an email, info@insideanalysis.com. With that, we're going to bid you farewell. Take care, folks. And this webcast will be up tomorrow on the archive. Take care. Bye-bye.